Neighborhood history 24/7, 365 or 366 if it happens to be a leap year. This is History Hefner wearing my usual garb, my dressing gown, my 19th century style smoking jacket, made popular by British troops when they returned from the front lines of the Ottoman Russian war known as the Crimean War. They helped out the Ottomans and they got a lot of Turkish tobacco, and they needed gowns to protect their street clothes from getting the dust and the ash and the smell of their Turkish tobacco from their street clothes. So they developed these dressing gowns, better known as smoking jackets. And if you like that kind of history or any other type of history, you are in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing and becoming a member of the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And for the next hour or so, I will be answering all of your questions related to history, social studies, geopolitics, both past and present, and the humanities. So if you enjoy history, you are in the right place. And hello, Hars. Hello, Harry. Hars, play nice. My wonderful moderators here to hold down the chat. If you guys could put the social media and the handles, that would be really, the social media handles in the chat, that would be extremely helpful. And it's so good to see you, Harry. Thank you so much for your support on Substack. You guys can follow me on Substack and read my articles about different historical and cultural topics there, where if you don't like the sound of my voice, but you like my ideas, you can read about my ideas there. So, shout out to today's sponsor. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have a sponsor for today, but Crystal Geyser is definitely one of the best waters around. So, and yes, good to see everybody so far. If you have a question related to history or social studies or a topic you would like me to discuss, please drop it in the chat. We do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also have a live stream on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I will be doing a live stream lecture. And Hars, can you remind me the topic for tomorrow and our topic there for the live stream lecture? And I don't know what the burned over district is, so I'm going to have to do some research about that. I don't know everything about history, but I think I know a decent amount, and that's why we have these Q&As and Ask Me Anything live streams every Friday and Saturday at 6 Eastern, where you can ask me about any type of history you might be interested in. We had a very lively and enjoyable one that went an hour and a half hour longer than usual yesterday, because we had such great characters coming and asking all sorts of incredibly interesting history questions, bringing up different topics for a debate and discussion, and I really, really loved it. And so hopefully today brings some of that magic over from yesterday. And yes, we're going to be looking at early American history tomorrow. Thank you for reminding me, Hars. We're going to look at America from 1783 until the age of Jackson and the rise of the Democratic Party in the 1830s. So come being ready to learn a little bit about early American history in the United States here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel for our weekly Sunday live stream, our live stream lecture where I discuss a particular historical topic. And Fridays and Saturdays, it's all you guys asking whatever questions you would like. So if you enjoy social studies and the like, consider liking and subscribing. Boy, I used like in like three times that sentence. But yeah, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we bring you history in a friendly, neighborly manner. I'm History Hefner, here to answer all of your questions related to history and the like. So, hello, hello. The Shakers. Shakers were a group of American Christians, part of the Second Great Awakening in the 19th century, who kind of died out because they didn't believe in breeding. They didn't believe in having sex, so they died out after a while. And Evan, great to see you back. I really appreciated your contributions yesterday. Let me see. Sato, hello. Antos, David, hello. Johnny, I'll remember that. Do you think a horse is stronger than a dolphin? All depends where you're fighting. Who do you think was the greatest Roman? I would have to say Augustus Caesar. Greatest Roman emperor, probably the greatest Roman, although Cicero, with all of his writings and statements and political wisdom, was obviously one of the best to ever do it as well. Yes, Evan, you are definitely one of the many lives of the party here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, and I would never report anyone. I don't report people. I block comments that I think are offensive, disrespectful, dirty, or just going way off the rails, but I don't like to do that. And usually I rely on my moderators, Harry and Hars, to do that. So why did World War I end? Well, my instinct is to say that World War I ended because of the Treaty of Paris of 1763, which ended the 7 Years' War. Excuse me, but you're probably referring to the Great War, what I consider to be World War II. Basically, the Americans helping on the Western Front, the Germans basically starving to death, the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the many rebellions within the Ottoman Empire led the three major powers of the Central Powers to basically collapse imperially and politically by the end of the 1910s, and that led to the end of what I consider to be World War II, what you call World War I, and I like to meet in the middle by calling it the Great War. So, he is not an Indian Hindu. Yes, that's true. And Cicero said, please don't leave a mess. So I've got two of my favorite Romans, and one is responsible for the other one's death. Isn't that interesting? Not emperor or anything, but just best Roman and part of the Republic or Empire, not one of those fake empires, although I would accept Western Rome and the Byzantine Empire. Fair enough. I would say my favorite Roman, probably Cicero's up there, Seneca. When it comes to Roman Republic, I love Cincinnatus, the man who kept giving up power and then retaining it because he was needed to defeat barbarian invasions in Rome. Really stand-up guy, the model of what a virtuous leader looks like. Inspired George Washington to give up power. Just wanted to be a farmer at his home villa. Same thing with Washington returning to Mount Vernon in 1797. Sahil, hello. And hello, Murat, joining us from Turkey. We have people from Great Britain and Turkey and all over the world joining us here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we talk about global history, not just American or Western history. Any history you are interested in discussing or asking about, I am ready to answer about. So, since Harsh is allowed to have opinions, I can also have them. Everyone's allowed to have an opinion. Why wasn't there a war between the United States and the Soviets in the Cold War? There were proxy wars. Basically, the two largest, most powerful sides, both having nuclear weapons, deterred land war because if there was ever a real war between the two of them directly, the use of nuclear weapons would have been extremely likely, which would have led to annihilation of the vast majority of the Western world and Russia. So it's actually the nuclear weapons that were used as a deterrent to prevent a land war, which would have caused tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of deaths. The cover-up of Biden's mental decline is the biggest scandal in American history, and it's just starting to come out. It's definitely one of the bigger ones. It's obviously one of the biggest scandals in U.S. presidential history. It's right up there with Watergate and the Monica Lewinsky affair. But it's more of a dereliction of duty by the media, and the cover-up is obviously really bad. Obviously, President Trump, who's in the office now, has his fair share of scandals and issues. You've got a convicted felon serving in the White House, and you have the guy who never should have been in the White House, who served previously before him, who is now extremely, probably terminally ill and also had a steep mental decline. So Biden should have probably never run for president in the first place, knowing he faced these certain health challenges, and then the cover-up of it just makes it look worse in retrospect. So so if you enjoyed the history or the geopolitics that I just discussed, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. If you feel so inclined, you may join or donate and help us grow our brand, get the equipment, get us up and running. We just got monetized by YouTube. We're really excited about all that we can do. We're going to be doing member-only lives and member-only videos. Early releases on videos are available for those of you who become members. So yeah, consider joining or donating to help the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel grow. I don't know much about Meredith, but an interesting one, Term. C, thank you for joining us from Rio de Janeiro. Good to see you again. Who is the greatest British Prime Minister, Palmerston or Pitt the Elder? I'm sorry, it's Churchill. Gotta go with Churchill. Let me see. Can you give me a quick overview of England and U.S. over independence? I'm from the UK. So I'm going to give as fair of a perspective as I possibly can. The British levied an extremely small tax on their American colonies, known as the Sugar Act, that was not popular, and then they imposed the Stamp Act, and there became this cycle where the Americans did not like it that they were being taxed, not because it was too hefty, but because they didn't have direct representation in Parliament. The different colonies were used to paying taxes to their colonial governments, and then those taxes being part of those taxes being given to the British government. But direct taxation by the British government was not part of American colonial history up to this point. They resisted it, they boycotted it, they smuggled in goods, they attacked tax officials, they tarred and feathered them in horrible terrorist attacks, just in their attempt to resist British taxation. And eventually, the cycle began where Britain would impose a new tax, the Americans would resist it through boycotts, tarring and feathering, and smuggling, and eventually Britain would take the tax off the table when they weren't getting the revenues that they actually wanted. The only tax they refused to relent upon was the tea tax, which led to the Boston Tea Party, where a bunch of tea was thrown into Boston Harbor. Eventually, the British tried to lock down Boston and much of Massachusetts colony, which at that time included Vermont. A bunch of American rebels, known as patriots as they were called, refused to give up munitions to the British at Lexington, and this led to the first battle of the American Revolution on April 19th, 1775. So there you go. There's a quick overview of that. How aren't the Napoleonic Wars World War II? All major powers on at least 3 continents. You have a little bit of that. With the Ottoman and Egyptian involvement, I would say you have a little bit of a persuasive argument there. But the Napoleonic Wars were bits and pieces. The war with the Ottomans in Egypt was only until about 1802. Then you have these different wars of coalitions. So the Napoleonic Wars is not one ongoing war like the 7 Years' War, the Great War, or World War III. It's a war that is happening in bits and starts in different places, and it's mainly Eurocentric. And yes, the 7 Years' War and the Great War are Eurocentric as well, but you don't have as extensive fighting. When the Spanish join the 7 Years' War, they bring South America into the conflict because the Portuguese are fighting them as well. That's true in the Napoleonic Wars to some extent, but there isn't as widespread fighting in places like Africa and India and so that's Asia and Africa, as there was in the 7 Years' War. So Joe, that's why I don't consider the Napoleonic Wars to be World War II, but I consider the 7 Years' War to be World War I, and the Great War to be World War II, and the war with the Nazis and the Japanese to be World War III. So, let me see here. No, I'm not the president, but good guess. Let me see here. Tell me what the history is regarding Alexander the Great, please. Where did he travel? So Alexander the Great, I have an entire video on him. I have long-form videos that drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so go check those out. But I've got one on Alexander the Great. His father, Philip II of Macedon, had perfected the usage of the phalanx infantry, which was the Greek long spearmen who would carry the round shields, the helmets, and the heavy breastplate armor. He had perfected that and used that to successfully conquer and integrate the rest of Greece into his growing Macedonian empire. Greece was finally united under him, and under Alexander, who took over after Philip was suddenly assassinated, he doubled down and targeted the destruction of the Persian Empire, which he was eventually able to succeed in doing, most notably through the battle at Gaugamela, where he defeated the army of Emperor Darius. He also conquered the Levant and Palestine, as well as Egypt. And he wouldn't stop at Persia, and after destroying the Achaemenid Persians, he went into Afghanistan and India, and that is where he was eventually forced by his troops who were about to mutiny to return to Greece, where he died en route. So he spent very little time in Greece. So yeah, and I don't think Octavian's overrated at all. Yep, I'm still seeing the comments, so don't worry, Evan. So hopefully you like that story about Alexander. If you want more details about this amazing man, check out my video about that. Yeah, Drone, I've heard that too. It's not true. Why is Julius Caesar one of the most famous? Probably because he was such a successful general that he brought the Caesars from being an unknown family to being the most powerful family in the ancient world. And thanks to the repertoire and clout and influence and military superiority that he built, his nephew took up that mantle with Octavian Caesar, and the Caesars became the Roman emperors. And every term for emperor since then has been Roman in origin. The term emperor itself comes from the Latin imperator, which is a title they used for Octavian, for any leader of military troops, really. But also Caesar became Kaiser in German, Tsar in Russian and Bulgarian, all of those terms. So. And I wear a robe. It's a dressing gown. It's a smoking jacket. It is a gift from one of my Patreons, and was a big support to the channel. And it's a very historical garment worn by British troops and officers who came back from the Crimean War against after helping the Turks defeat the Russians in the 1850s. They brought back a bunch of Turkish tobacco, and not wanting to smoke it and get it all over their street clothes, they would typically wear these kinds of gowns and dressing robes over it. And so the smoking jacket has become one of the most luxurious types and most enjoyable and relaxing and smooth types, silky, sheeny, all of that stuff, for velour, all of that for a dressing gown. So it's a glorified robe, yes. Hello? Ever seen Weekend at Bernie's? Nope. I am from the United States. I won't get into too much more than that. The Second Great Awakening really kick-started the abolitionist movement in a way it hadn't been before. Many of the great abolitionist movements came out of a Second Great Awakening and its call for social change. The temperance movement came out of the Second Great Awakening, as did the women, and the temperance movement became a vehicle that carried women's rights, the first wave feminism, and the suffragette movement throughout the rest of the 1800s. So basically all of the social movements of the United States, the progressive movement, the abolitionist movement, the suffragette movement, the prohibition movement, or the temperance movement, all started as a result of social engagement and calls to action by the Second Great Awakening preachers, such as Charles Finney, who was a noted abolitionist. The Moors were a Muslim kingdom, an emirate that controlled the southern part of Spain during the 14th and 15th centuries that were eventually driven out by Ferdinand and Isabella when Granada was conquered in 1492. They were the inheritors of a long line of Muslim rulers and dynasties over Al-Andalus, as it was called, that had started with the Umayyad Caliphate in 711. So, yeah, Caesar was, but he was way too arrogant, couldn't smell a plot to save his life, and it was Octavian who avenged his death and used his political clout in order to rule for 45 years, create a peaceful system, expand Rome's borders, and slowly but surely become the most powerful man in the world while nobody saw him doing it. It's incredible what Octavian was able to accomplish, Harry. And namaste to you as well. You're in Rome, and it's just after midnight. Well, thank you for joining us from Rome. So we've got people from Italy, we've got people from India, we've got people from Britain. It's always great to see everybody. What about the Irish? What do you want to know about the Irish, Keely? I'm more than willing to talk about it. Excuse me. What was Hunter Biden's history in Ukraine? Yes, I know. That's part of the attacks on the Biden family. I've already talked a little bit about that. JG, there are a lot of people who would agree with you, even over here in the States, about making America British again. And I'm going through the chat as much as I can, so if you have a question or topic, I promise I'll get to it as soon as possible. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the history that we have been talking about, and if you feel so inclined, a donation always helps grow the channel. Why... Are we back? I went out for a second. Okay, we went out. Sorry about that. Onteg is asking Harry. Oh, he's asking Harry a question. Let me see here. Do you think Germany would have won World War II if they sacked the oil fields instead of attacking Stalingrad? I think they should have focused on either Stalingrad or Leningrad. One of the two would have been best. So, and yes, Riz, this is my smoking jacket. And follow us on the social media handles that Harsh put up. Make sure to put the Patreon and Substack up and all of that great stuff. Do you believe that your country and Israel are the major cause of unrest in the world? There's a bunch of different major causes of unrest in the world, and I'm trying to avoid the Israel talk as much as possible because we had a really engaging discussion about it yesterday. The United States definitely has had its hands and too many fingers in too many pies, which is why isolationism is popular again. What was the name of the most sadistic ruler I heard? That one who kept a boy as a concubine. Is that an actual true story? And did some emperor keep boys? Yes, that's you're thinking of Tiberius, who, according to the Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius, who hated him. He was so depraved that he would keep children around him as basically human captives and engage in human trafficking on his remote island of Capri. And if they displeased him, he would throw them off of the cliffs. That's the second Roman emperor, Tiberius, the emperor who was a contemporary of Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah, Larry, I know a little bit about that. Supposedly, they landed in Newfoundland after going to Greenland. There's not exactly proof of it, but it is highly rumored that they arrived in that land and eventually died out or were killed off by natives that they fought with. Why does it matter how ancient megaliths were constructed? The biggest question surrounding megaliths that often raise questions about giants or aliens is that people don't know where these incredibly impressive structures come from or how they were built. So that's a big part of it. I do not, Zaya. Let me see. Was Islam more antagonistic, less inclined to grant divinity status towards Zoroastrianism than towards Christianity? If so, why, given they were roughly monotheistic? Because you're talking, Joe, about when the Rushtun Caliphate destroyed the Sassanid Empire and took away Israel from the Byzantine Empire. The main reason for this is that Islam, because it considers itself to be an Abrahamic religion, does not have a cultural tie or religious historical association with Zoroastrianism, despite it being monotheistic. Same thing with Hinduism and Buddhism. It considers itself tied to Christianity and Judaism, and they call the people the jinn, the people of the book, referring to Jews and Christians. So there's a symmetry that Islam sees a connection between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam that they don't have with Zoroastrians. So let's see here. And no, not New Hefner, just New History Hefner. Let me see here. Going through the chat. And yes, Stan, I'm just going through the chat. That's why I'm not saying anything. I do not have slippers. I do have a pipe, but I don't like to smoke here in the studio. Yes, that sounds like Octavian. He wasn't militarily incompetent. Augustus was not an incredible military commander, but he knew that, and he was able to hire and use relatively great commanders to win great wars, and Rome grew exponentially under him. Rome took over Illyricum, large sections of Germany, Judea. The Romans were at the height of their territorial extent until Trajan under Augustus. So Augustus knew what he didn't know. He knew how to build an empire. He knew what laws to enact. He knew how to keep order. He knew how to assume more and more power. He wasn't a military expert, and that's why he relied on men like Agrippa and Germanicus to deal with his enemies, and they dealt with them extremely well. So, and he figured out how to run the empire like a one-man band, and he succeeded in surviving and creating a dynasty when Julius, his great uncle and adoptive father, had not. So, yes, the purge was as part of was basically a revenge tour against the senators who had assassinated Julius. So it was all Octavian getting back at them, and that included killing most of the upper elites, what had originally been called the optimates, the Roman senators who represented the traditional establishment that his uncle and others before his uncle had challenged. That's what Octavian was doing. Yes, Cicero died in that. I do not like that. I'm not saying that Octavian was perfect. I am saying that he was an extremely good ruler and better than Julius. No, I'm not lazy with that, but thank you for joining us, Larry, from Newfoundland. So let's see. I'm trying to catch up with the chat here. America started in 1619. I don't like that. I don't like that date. I don't know when you could say America technically started. I mean, I would almost go with when it was officially called America because of Amerigo Vespucci, who proved that Columbus had not gone to India. And it kind of is the plot of Star Wars. Life imitates art and vice versa. Thank you for joining us from the Netherlands. Yes, which is what has distinguished in many ways what was called the Spanish Netherlands and the Dutch and the Austrian Netherlands, which became Belgium. Yep, and it's the plot of the Roman Empire. What's your favorite civilization or empire of all time? Chris is asking. That would probably be. I love learning about the Russian Empire. That's where my focus has been in my historical studies, so I would go with that. Studio, sure, I'll do a voice acting. McDonald's, the Golden Horde was a group of Mongol warriors who successfully conquered the Kievan Rus in the 13th century under Batu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, and they basically forced the Russians into a state of vassaldom for about 2.5 centuries. What's up, he? Compared to their contemporaries, the Swedes at their height are the Romans are at theirs. People don't sleep on the Swedish, and they don't see how in the late 17th century the Swedish and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth were extremely powerful, but the Swedes tipped over because the Russians became powerful thanks to Peter the Great. Their dominance, their influence was really only for a century. I got to go with the Romans. It's not even that close. Excuse me, Danish. I think I answered your question, but if you want to ask it again, I'll answer it again. If you get a chance, which world leader would you choose to represent whole Earth? Oh, geez. That's a tough one. I don't know. It's hard to pick anyone at this point. Just the world leaders seem to be all over the place, and no one seems to be acting in the best interest of their countrymen necessarily. Let me see. Yeah, studio, if you want to send a script, send it to my email, friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com. There you go. So if you ever have an inquiry or you want to have a conversation about a topic that is not related to what we're doing here, or you want to go into more depth, or you have comments or feedback or suggestions, you can email us at friendlyneighborhoodhistory. And of course, you can follow us on the social media that Horace has put in the chat. So what do you think of the Battle of Poitiers? That's also known as the Battle of Tours. It is what stopped the century of Muslim conquest, where the Muslims had successfully conquered the Maghreb, most of the Middle East, Al-Andalus, aka Spain, and parts of Anatolia. They were stopped in France by Charles Martel, whose son Pepin the Short overthrew the Merovingians and established the First French Kingdom. One of the most important battles in European history. McDonald's, you know your battles, so thank you for asking about it. Was Columbus the first person to go to America? As I heard, it was Abu Mansa. That's probably not true that it was Abu Mansa, and Columbus certainly wasn't the first person. Discovering America is a total myth. Just like thinking that he went there to prove the world was round. Also a total myth. What do you think that? Do I think that Jews are indirectly controlling Christians? No, not all of them. Some Christians certainly have a penchant for Zionism and for Israeli and being friendly towards Jews in Israel because of their shared religious heritage, or because they have theories about the end times that relate to Judaism and the importance of Jews in the nation of Israel, but not totally. T.I., I've answered that question. You're just trolling at this point. Annie, the maps were, that's a good question, but the maps were inconclusive at the time, so Columbus had no idea where he actually was. He felt, and he was actually technically correct, that if he went westward, he could get to India rather than going around the Cape of Good Hope. The Europeans knew how to get to Africa. They went around the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa to get to India. They knew how to get to India. Columbus is the one who theorized that if he went westward, he would get to India. Until the early 19th century, people were still trying to figure out easy ways to get through the Pacific Ocean and get to the Far East in India. Columbus was right, but he stopped too soon, and he didn't know that there was a second hemisphere to account for. And Arian, my content is about history and social studies of all kinds. This is our Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where you can ask a question related to history and the like. And if you haven't done so, please consider liking and subscribing. How different things could have been had the Tsar industrialized the country the way the Britons had during the Industrial Revolution. It's unfortunate how the empire crumbled. And Alexander II was on its way to do that before he was killed. So 010, very good point. Why didn't the Chinese colonize? They actually did. Look up the treasure fleets of Zheng He during the Ming Dynasty. When Zheng He died and the Ming Dynasty turned inward, the treasure fleet stopped the colonization and exacting tribute from Southeastern Asia and the islands around Australia. If they had continued, they might have eventually reached the Americas. Did Genghis Khan become Muslim eventually and then conquer India as the Mughal Empire? No, Evan. Genghis never really adopted any religion. The Mongols had a habit of adopting whatever religion they went that represented the culture they conquered. They not only changed the culture by dominating it, but they also tended to adopt different cultural practices and habits. The Ilkhanate, which were the Mongols who conquered Persia, became Muslims. The Yuan dynasty fashioned itself as a Chinese imperial dynasty despite being rigidly Mongolian with Kublai Khan. Genghis Khan himself died without, and there was basically this belief in some sort of deity who was the god of the sun, or the god of the sky, but there really wasn't a firm commitment to a religious belief, and so the Mongols were more willing to adapt to the religions around them. There was a man named Babur who was related to Timur, of a Timurid empire, who was a Mongol, who had Mongol blood in him. And because Babur was related to the Mongols and to Genghis Khan indirectly, he became and he founded the Mughal Empire, which is the Indian name for Mongol. So Babur is the connection, not Genghis Khan. And yes, Kevin, great to see you. And remember, like the live, subscribe to more. Who was a better general, Prince Eugene or Hannibal? I'm going to go with Hannibal because only one general single-handedly brought Rome to its knees. And it was only because Scipio did to Hannibal what Hannibal had done to him that the Romans won. Isaac, those are two great choices. I have videos on both Napoleon and Alexander the Great. I would go Napoleon, then Alexander the Great, and then probably Julius Caesar. Let me see. Do you think they lie about how advanced our ancestors were just so we don't realize how advanced humans could possibly be? Yes, I do believe that, and that happens in different areas of the world. There is not enough historical attention given to the Islamic Golden Age and what the Abbasid Caliphate was able to accomplish in the 9th and 10th centuries. And 11th centuries. There is not, the Dark Ages don't exist. That's a total myth, thought up by the Enlightenment as a way to attack Catholic Europe. Obviously, the Mayas and the Aztecs had extremely complex societies that weren't just a bunch of provincial people who hadn't invented the wheel. These predilections and preconceptions are just made by people who are ignorant or want other people to be ignorant about the societies of the past. Human beings are not necessarily smarter than they were 2,000 years ago. I'm not any smarter than Plato. I just have the ability to access a lot of knowledge really quickly, and Plato had some of that, but not a lot of that compared to me. So our capital, our ability to learn things, is obviously easier, quicker, and more extensive than humans in the past, but we are not necessarily smarter or more advanced. We have better technology. That's the only difference. Technology, being a cornerstone of human development and human interaction, is one of my biggest historical philosophies. And I've talked about that before, but Evan, that's a great question. What's the point of Fort Sumter? Fort Sumter was a fort in South Carolina in the Charleston Harbor that was attacked by Confederates when Abraham Lincoln attempted to resupply it on April 12, 1861. That attack was bloodless. The Confederates captured the fort. The Union Army abandoned it, and that's considered the start of the Civil War. Let me see here. And Britain did loot a lot from India, and which was common for colonial powers to do. I understand some Muslims might be hypocrites, but do you think is Islam a wrong religion? Why Islam is being propagated as terrorists all over the world, but the real story is opposite? I said this yesterday. Danish, you would have enjoyed the chat yesterday. Islamic terrorists, their biggest victims are other Muslims. Islam does not, in its core, in many facets of its religion, does not teach violence and terrorism. There are parts of it that certainly do and include that. What we have is a lack of adaptation that we have seen Christians and Jews make. Jews do not think about conquest the same way they did in the Old Testament. Christians do not think about it the same way they did during the Crusades. Radical Islam, which mainly targets Muslims who they don't believe, who are not as extreme as they are, but also targets anyone who's not a Muslim, has given a lot of Islam a bad reputation when that's not fair. And I've done a lot of history on Islam, and that's just not the case. So, do Columbus know about your information? No. Bilderberg, isn't that the group of high-ranking government officials and technocrats who meet, I forget where, and it's kind of a secret organization? No, Jared, I can't think of a particular genocide that is happening on Earth now. Islam is the fastest-growing religion in the world. Even the media and world propagates Islam as a terrorist religion. Terrorist religions can grow. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Islam is growing because the birth rates in areas that are largely Muslim, like Nigeria, fast outpace the birth rates in traditionally Christian areas like Western Europe and the United States. Like Hitler, Nazis, British also created genocide wherever they stepped barefoot. That's not fully true. The British do have some encounters that are definitely closer to that. The Irish potato famine, the Bengal famine, I'm very well aware of Britain's sins, and I am not going to tout the imperviousness or perfection or impeccability of the British Empire, but there is not a targeted genocidal mania in British history that is even close to the Holocaust. So, and yes, Ben-Day, I am very comfortable. Yeah, I'm very glad that there's inventions like that. And the Muslims had some of the building blocks of our modern scientific achievements. That's what the Islamic Golden Age achieved, Evan. Yugoslavia was doomed from the beginning and was a bad idea. Yes, it was just trying to figure out what to put in this vacuum that had once been the mighty Austro-Hungarian Empire. People know Islam invented algorithms and algebra, but they just love to live in a reality that justifies their own opinions on Islam. Yes, just like Christianity invented universities. Skeptics are going to be critical and find only the worst when there's a lot of good, and I shed a light on it here in the channel, and it should be done elsewhere as well. What is your ethnicity? I'm an American. I don't get more specific than that. I let people guess after that, Chris. Yeah, people are easily distracted because of bad technology. So the technology of the Industrial Revolution manages to connect people in ways unforeseen with things like the airplane, telegraph, telephone, car, and train. But it also propagates heavy artillery and those same planes, submarines. Those are used for violence and warfare and leads to mass killing in the Great War. So technology can be good and can be bad. It's all how humans use it. And yes, I wouldn't say the North shot first. Hadi, do not spam the chat with flags. Kevin, hello. I don't say which religion I am. I do affirm some belief in a higher power, but beyond that, I don't say. I'm okay with beige. It's fine. Let me see here. And yes, Harry will always be here to defend Britain, and I will defend Britain when I think it is necessary, and I will attack Britain when I also think it is necessary as a historian. Ayodeji is asking, good to see you again, by the way, would Europe have advanced as fast had the Carolingians joined with the Byzantines and recreated the empire? No, and they never were going to. I don't know if the Byzantines wanted to do that, and you would have had the Crusades a lot earlier, and you would have had a bigger attention towards the Middle East, and who knows what would have happened there. You would have had a lot more, a continual, perhaps ongoing state of perpetual warfare that involved Western Europe and the Middle East before the Crusades, centuries before the Crusades. Because the different Muslim caliphates, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Ayyubids, the Seljuks, they were very interested in taking up Anatolia and land from the Byzantines. Hi, Jazak, or Isaac. What's your opinion about Iran? Persia. I prefer to call it Persia. It's a colonial term. It is based on the fact that the British characterized them as being Aryan peoples, and that's where it actually comes from. But even other religions also reverting to Islam, just like so many people like Muhammad Ali. That's people have testimonials and conversions all over the place. It's not necessarily happening at the rate you think it is. Was there police in the Carolingian Empire or something like that? You had guards, you had a feudal medieval system, which basically had the ruler on top, the nobles underneath him, knights, soldiers, and armies underneath them, and they kept the order. And they were responsible for making sure the peasants, who were below them, farmed their crops and paid their goods and services, paid their taxes and produced goods and services. Did the Moors set up the first universities, street lighting, and bathing with steam like Turkish baths, Hammam in Spain, as I haven't seen them in Granada? They did set up some of the first steam baths and bathing. They did bring that to the Europeans. The first universities, not quite. There were academies for scholarship long before in both the Muslim and non-Muslim world. The ancient world had them. You had the academy with Plato. The university system, as we understand it today, is a Western European invention during the Middle Ages. I believe religion, with all its laws and authorizations, hinders human creativity and capability. Look at the state of the world we live in as a result of religion. I don't know if it's necessarily religion's fault. On the other end, I would see, I appreciate your opinion and I see where you're coming from, but you have some of the most important inventors and discoverers in history were extremely religious people. More Muslims convert to Christianity than any other way around. It can differ by year, but in the last 100 years, that definitely is the case. Yes, Ricky, that happened in the Byzantine Empire when they were conquered by the Muslims, and the Muslims basically would tax people if they did not accept Islam. Conquest, conversion, birth rates, societal takeover, this has led to Islamic conversion, either willingly or not so willingly. So, will there be global peace in a post-scarcity economy? I don't know. We could be in a post-scarcity economy right now if people weren't so greedy. And hello, RC. Do you think British affected a lot of the world through colonization? Is Europe to blame for the rest of the world being impoverished through their pillaging and looting of natural resources? Not fully, not necessarily. The problems with Africa today are not as a direct result of colonization. Certainly that has its place to play, but there are other factors that came into it as well. Do you think there was any scenario where the Republic could have been saved? No. I think the Republic had grown so corrupt that any sort of popular support, any sort of populism was seen as a threat to power. And that is why Cassius and Brutus and the other senators were so resistant to Caesar and Octavian. I support peace. What's your opinion about Israel and Iran and Trump, the whole fiasco? So basically what's happening right now is the Trump administration is pulling away its support from Israel slowly but surely as it tries to reach some sort of nuclear deal and peace agreement with Iran. And basically, they're saying either Iran and the Palestinians play and work with the U.S. and negotiate, or Trump will let Israel attack Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran has enriched a large amount of uranium, and many people believe they have gotten to the point where they might be nuclear weapons capable. What I mean is that if Britain had never existed, would India and other regions they conquered still be rich and prosperous? To say that India was overwhelmingly rich and prosperous isn't necessarily fair. India is more prosperous today than it was when the British showed up. You had a powerful Mughal empire that was in steady decline. You had a lot of division that the British and French manipulated in the 7 Years' War, for example. The Maratha Confederacy, for instance. Assuming that areas are necessarily rich and powerful before the Europeans show up and the Europeans show up and then they immediately go to pot isn't true. Just like assuming that when Islam showed up, before then, India was peaceful and stable. And then afterwards, it was just a war-torn area between Hindus and Muslims. Those assumptions are also made. Some of that's true, just like some of the pillaging and looting by the Europeans is true, but it's not all or nothing at all. I think it could be the opposite. Religion serve as the beginning structure for societies and law and order and culture. In certain areas, really, religion is just a tool, just like technology, and people use it for whatever purpose they may deem as necessary or whatever fits best. Do you think Yugoslavia would have survived if Tito didn't die in 1980? He would have died eventually, and I don't think they needed a strongman because of all the ethnic differences and variations and fighting. So Amar, at some point Tito would have had to die, and at some point Yugoslavia would have failed in its existence. Okay, Ozzy, stop saying the same thing over and over again. It's getting annoying, and it's not true anyways. And the smoking jacket, I wear it all the time. It's my usual regalia when I do my Q&A, Ask Me Anythings every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and my live stream lectures, unless it's too hot. And today it's borderline, but I'm actually able to wear it and enjoy it. Is Israel doing good? Oh boy, here we go again. In Gaza, by attacking on hospitals, schools, and killing and destroying innocent kids, women, and olds, and innocent young people, do you think it's right? No. There you go. No one is saying it's right. I'm certainly not. I was also wondering what's with the Playboy cigar jacket. It makes me History Hefner. It's a gift from a Patreon, a subscriber to the channel, and it is a holiday gift that I very much cherish. And it is very dapper. It has historical origins, and so it has become my usual garb for the live stream. Which was the most successful empire? Some say it was the Ottomans, as they conquered for up to 800 years. The Ottomans are there. They were conquerors. They conquered. They were stable. They were successful, and they were powerful. The British, by population and expanse, are the most successful, and the Romans are obviously the model for all Western empires. So those are some of the ones I would think about. And Russia is always the largest nation on earth, so their empire was extremely expansive as well. What was the appeal of joining the army in antiquity? With no trauma medicine, fighting a certain death. But if you were a slave, you could expand your horizons and you could gain something. And if you fought well enough and you proved to be a mighty warrior, you could actually earn a level of prestige and honor in the army. I'm thinking about the Romans or the Persians, for instance. My live stream is not sponsored by Crystal Geyser, but this is good water. I adhere to the theory that humans likely developed into the bicameral mind in the Bronze Age, and that religion is a mutation that turned out to be beneficial. We started dreaming abstractions that unite. I agree with you, except for the Bronze Age part. I go back to the Copper Age. Before we're even writing histories, we have religious roots there. I mean, the worship of the Hindu gods, monotheism, the Egyptian gods, every society that emerges, every culture that emerges, 30,000, 3,500 BC, has religious systems set up, because it's part of how humans interact with each other. It's part of how culture develops. I don't believe people in this world get conversion into Islam. They learn about Islam by their heart and not their mind that you accept. That's not true, Danish. There are certainly plenty of people who accept Islam, like Lou Alcindor, who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali. Many people throughout the world embrace Islam willingly, and many people embrace Christianity and Buddhism willingly. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't ever spread, and forced conversions are necessary. Someone can be forced by the sword, someone can be forced by external pressure, someone can be forced because of a culture they grew up in. And that is common in the Ottoman Empire in the 15th and 16th centuries, and it's common in the Carolingian Empire of the 9th century in France. Yeah. Soldiers typically were a way to jump classes in antiquity. Somewhat. That was a way to move forward. What's your favorite hominid species? The sapiens, I would say. I'm not technically an anthropologist, but we do talk about that sometimes. What might have happened had the Ottomans joined with the Allied powers in defiance of Germany? That war would have been over a lot more quickly. Saudi Arabia would not exist, and the Ottomans would have been buoyed by the Europeans, and the sick man of Europe would have been tended to by the British and the French. The Germans wouldn't have had much of a leg to stand on. The Austrians and Hungarians would be attacked from the southeast by the Greeks and the Ottomans, and the war would have turned out very badly and ended a lot sooner, and the Russian Empire probably would have stayed together. It wouldn't have had time for the revolution to take effect. Yeah, the idea that every area in the world is a complete utopia before an invader shows up and then they turn it to pot is not true. But Harry, I'm sticking up for the British this time. So what you're saying is, if someone is declining and it is easier for people to make the empire fall faster, that actually makes sense on so many levels. Yes, Evan, you and I didn't agree on much yesterday, but it seems like we're agreeing on most everything today. Do you like RSS Hinduvita, who mocking Islamic Mughal Empire and their architect of Taj Mahal? They hate Muslims. Is this fair? People hate people for other reasons, and I don't think it's ever fair to hate someone. What country invented the crab cake? Pickles, you always have such good and interesting questions that I haven't thought of. I don't know. I think they're European. They might be Nordic. Not sure. And like and subscribe if you haven't so far. When did the bombard replace the trebuchet? The Ottomans actually brought gunpowder to the West, at least in the sense of using cannon fire, and that's in the 15th century. So 15th, 16th century, the bombard became the proto-cannon that was used by Europeans and the Ottomans and the Safavid Persians and stuff like that. Yes, The British ended sati and other things. So there's good parts of colonialism and there's bad parts of colonialism, Harry. I love the story of how the British ended sati in India, by the way. It's one of the best moments in British history. Where does the Dar al-Islam Harb distinction come from? Not sure. I don't know what those are, Joe, so I can't say. EA, hello. My favorite English king, 4204. Go look at my long-form video where I do a tier ranking of English monarchs. The best, in my opinion, is Elizabeth. My favorite, you're just asking about English kings. My favorite would probably be Victoria, but that's a queen. I like Longshanks, Edward Longshanks. He gets too much of a bad rap, and that's mainly because of Braveheart. He was cruel, but he was extraordinarily effective, and he basically didn't have any chinks in his armor when it came to his military prowess and the way he ruled over England. He really never had a setback. He's the reason England conquered Wales, and the reason why Scotland probably got brought into the English sphere of influence, which would continue until it became part of Great Britain. Did we need something like Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth again, so it could be an Eastern European counterweight to Russia? That would be pretty cool, Lester. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth handed the Russians their rears on a platter in the 1600s. Yeah, Poland was one of the most powerful countries in Europe in the early 1600s, and nobody knows about it. If you say no, then why United States supporting this genocide? Do you support your government? I love this false dichotomy of you don't think that this is okay, therefore why are you supporting this? I don't think it's okay. I'm saying that it's a common facet of most wars for things like this to happen. I'm saying it needs to end as soon as popular, and the United States needs to stop supporting it. There you go. I don't disagree with you, Danish, but I also don't fully buy into the notion that this is just one country bullying another. War, almost all wars include blame on both ends. Who are your top 3 American abolitionists of the pre-Civil War period? Lincoln, I would consider Lincoln an abolitionist. Harriet Beecher Stowe, and Garrison. Is King Richard, John's incompetent brother, overrated? Yes, because he never ruled as a king. He's a great general, not a great king. Why did Austria-Hungary not make a colonial empire? They were more situated with trying to take over as much of the Balkans as they could, southeastern Europe, areas like Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia. Those modern areas were extraordinarily important to them maintaining and growing their empire. They didn't have a navy, so they didn't become involved in imperial domination in Africa or Asia the way the British and the French did. Are you offended by Kemet of Egypt if it was Africa instead of Mediterranean or white civilization? No. I'm not. I don't care the Egyptians were not white. They are also not sub-Saharan African black. They are Middle Eastern, they are of the Maghreb, they're of Northern Africa, they are technically Africans, they are technically black, they are not the exact same as the Sudanese or the people of Ascom or the Bantu or other groups of that area. They are not white either. Yeah, that comes from a false ethnic dichotomy of it's either white or black people. And I mean, you do have Europeans, I guess, with the Ptolemaic line, but they are so Egyptian influenced that they're not Europeans at all. Did Homo floresiensis, the Hobbit, actually exist? This is an extinct species of small cake humans that inhabited the island of Flores of Indonesia until the arrival of modern humans 50,000 years ago. Never heard of them until now, and I don't know. Maybe. It's almost like pygmies in that sense. What do you know about Enoch and Metatron? Not much. Sorry about that. What's your major? I was a history major in college, and I have a master's in history, and my next step is a doctorate. I think the Ottomans still collapsed. I mean, we have been defending and intervening there for 100 years, and it never really improved. That's true. Was Sir Lancelot a real person? Probably not. Neither was King Arthur. Sorry about that. It tells you more about the mythologies of the Middle Ages than it does about actual rulers of England in the 5th and 6th centuries after the Romans left. Why I feel Jews are using America as superpower indirectly to make unrest and take control over all the world, especially not on Muslim countries. Am I thinking correct or no? There might be some of that in the ultra-right of the Israeli government, but you also have all the powers around Israel consistently threatening its very existence. So what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander. Hello, Matish. Why were most founding fathers not mainline Christian denomination? They were Freemasons or Congregationalists. Congregationalists were a mainline Christian denomination at the time. Deism was popular in the Enlightenment. It was sort of the edgy thing for philosophers and intellectuals to embrace more deistic theory to solve the problem of evil, whereas Christianity and old traditional religion was seen as somewhat archaic. It was more nuanced and intellectual to be a deist, which is why Jefferson was very much enamored with the French Enlightenment thinkers who were all either deists or skeptics. So there you go. I have not McDonald's, but I should play Crusader Kings 3. I'd say the British were closest to world domination. A quarter of the world's population were under the British Empire at the height of its power in the 1900s. Who is more important to their respective countries' formation, Selim the Great or Peter the Great? Oh, that's a tough one. I don't think you have Russia as a powerful European empire without Peter the Great, so I'd have to go with Peter the Great. Did Muslims invent colonization? No. Long before there was Islam, there were the Romans, and they were plenty good at colonization. Jason, what's your question that I won't be able to answer? Angel, hello. Do you believe in population control? I believe it happens. I don't believe it's a good idea. The only thing about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a universal one-man complete veto on anything in its parliament like Rome. Yeah, it was very dogged in its democracy, but it didn't get a lot done because of that. What are the benefits of the Third Reich? 404 error, server not found, that page doesn't exist. Why did Saladin let the Crusaders go? Wasn't this a strategic fallacy? No, he couldn't actually defeat them. And he had a lot of respect for Richard, and Richard had a lot of respect for him. I played Age of Empires and a little bit of Civilization, but my favorite was always Empire Earth. Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate your answer. We should understand we are temporary on this world, and we should live and support peace and harmony by implementing justice, peace, and equality. I absolutely agree, and I hope you've helped out this channel by doing that as well, by helping me spread truth, which will lead to justice, peace, and equality. So liking and subscribing hopefully helps me to do that, although I don't consider myself to be carrying any message other than a historical one. Truth, as some people have said, will set you free. Yes, there were a lot of different interactions of Homo sapiens. There were actually different species, almost like a Lord of the Rings situation with dwarves, elves, and orcs. Not really. Why do so few women get advanced history degrees? The liberal arts, humanities tend to be more influenced by women than men compared to STEM fields. But I think history has usually been a man's world. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying it exists. But you've got incredible female historians. Doris Kearns Goodwin, Lucy Wooding, who wrote that fantastic book about the Tudors that I still haven't finished, but I really love it. Women have been involved in history, but it is a disproportionately male field. I think it's the idea of war and power and things like this that have typically been seen as male-dominated. Let me see. I don't agree with the ICJ, Harry. Did the Ashkenazi Jews lineage from Cain? As I see, they came from Canaanites lineage. No. We humans can't, the ancient Egyptians knew they were a distinct group called the Hebrews or Hebrews. Let me see. How did Germany conquer France so quickly? I know about Blitzkrieg. Going through the forest and around the Maginot Line, destabilized the French army, and basically the FEF, or French Expeditionary Force, or the French Foreign Legion, wasn't strong enough to deal with the Nazis. They didn't have enough forces there, and the British ran away to Dunkirk. I don't know enough about that, McDonald's, to answer it. Thank you, Jesse, for screaming your answer. Politics, bias aside, pre-Watergate, how good was Nixon's administration? One of the most successful of the 20th century. Is the Sun King overrated? He bankrupted France, so just a little bit, but he's a pretty impressive and interesting guy. You can't have the history of France without Louis XIV. It's a genuine question. Yeah. I did answer it, Jason. I did. I just don't think there are any real benefits of it. Why did South Africa get rid of their nuclear weapons? I think I answered this yesterday. Do you think the Earth is truly unique, or do you believe there are other Earth-like planets out there in the universe, and if such planets do exist, doesn't that challenge the foundations of religion? Veiled, I think there probably are other Earth-like situations in other galaxies. We just haven't discovered them exactly, where you have enough balance in a particular solar system in relation to its particular star or stars that allows a planet to contain life. Yes, I do believe it's very possible. It would be foolish of me to assume that there is no life anywhere in the universe, and there can't be, with so many different galaxies and so many different solar systems. Yes, Michael, it will. It's just a question of when the U.S. will fall, not if it will fall. Let me see here. You didn't answer my question about Saladin letting the Crusaders go. I did, Evan. I said that Saladin let them go because he was because he respected Richard on the battlefield, and he knew he couldn't really beat him. They couldn't beat each other. That's why they made that treaty. Did Egyptians have wireless electricity like Tesla invented and experimented with? Not really, no. You can see some benefits. Well, Jason, share those benefits. I'm very interested what benefits you think you can see there, because I don't see any. Did other countries have physiocrats other than France in the late 18th century? Physiocrats. What do you mean by physiocrats, Joe? What is your favorite American patriotic song? Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm just going to go with Star Spangled Banner because it's easy and everybody knows it. I'm not lying altogether. I didn't know that. What hadith was he following? Saladin was an honorable man. He was extraordinarily fair and an excellent warrior. He's the greatest general, probably the most underrated general in history, the greatest Muslim general maybe ever. Why didn't Spain create a large colonial empire in Africa but rather focus on America? They didn't want to colonize Africa at the time because they wanted to build, they had already settled. They found it easier to extract slaves from Africa and use them for the cash crops that they had found in America. They actually saw Africa as more of as a business partner than as potential inferiors. Yeah, thanks, GVO. I appreciate that, I guess. Saladin quoted the hadith of the Prophet showing mercy to his enemies by letting them go. He couldn't beat him. Why did he make a treaty with him? Why did he make an agreement with him? Richard bested him several times on the battlefield, but Richard didn't have the forces or the strength. It's very easy. This happens all the time in history. It's very easy. I was following my ethics and my values. After you've been shown that you actually can't defeat him, as great as Saladin was, as amazing as a general as he wasn't able to beat Richard. Yeah. Islam teaches tolerance, but all but Muslim. It says it clearly in the hadiths. Okay. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. Yes, I know, Evan. And Brazil did indeed have the most slaves. The Portuguese started the slave trade and had the most slaves brought in. Physiocrats. Remember the 18th century group of French economists who believed that agriculture was the source of all wealth and that agricultural products should be highly priced. Russia certainly had that at that time. Do you think Gaddafi, if not assassinated, was going to conquer Africa? No, he was very weak, actually, when he was brought down. Why does still Spain have a border in Morocco? Because they once owned Morocco. Evan, do you know that the Muslims are the ones that gave him the title Lionheart? Saladin had a lot of respect for him, and Richard had a lot of respect for Saladin. It's actually one of the rare examples where Christians and Muslims, despite fighting each other, had enough respect. Yes, and we have hit just about an hour. No, I do not know what Drusina is right off the top of my head. Let me see here. Which country was the first to grant monopolies, set price controls? Oh, I don't know. I'd say the Romans were. Jason, that's not true. I deal with questions that I think I can answer, and if I can't answer them, I say I don't know. And when you ask what are the benefits of the Third Reich, I'm going to disagree and say there are none. Okay, it's that simple. And if there were some, I would say it. Yes, Ridley Scott. Yes, you're going to quote a movie as a historical source. That is not fair. I haven't quoted a movie as a historical source. Yes, Jesse, what do I not know about? Yes, and the British once owned Gibraltar. Which country was the first to grant patents? I think they're relatively modern. Obviously, ancient Greece has some of the first inventors, but the United States, if I'm correct, fully. And thank you for joining us, Kezar from Pakistan. Thank you, Shakuti from Pakistan. Great to see people from all over the world. If Jesus was a prophet, he said he was God, so he has to be God and not merely a prophet. That's a common Christian argument. Evan, I don't have strange views. That's actually what I'm saying is true. I have a very respectful view of Islamic history. I look at Islamic history based on what has happened, and I assess it based off of that. Is it true that there was an Islamic golden age? Yes. Was it true that the medieval Jews felt it was safer to live under the Muslims and the Christians? Absolutely. Is it also true that Islam spread mainly through conquest in its first century? Yes. The Rashdun Caliphate, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, these were not peaceful people. I'm sorry. You have to accept different facts. It's not strange to be able to hold different views. It's called critical thinking. Yes. It's your version of what is true. Could be a lie in the Middle East. Yes, but that doesn't mean it's not true. Just because you think it's a lie in the Middle East doesn't mean it's not true. Saladin really respected Richard. He got the term Lionheart from the Muslims. quoting a hadith about mercy probably is true. Saladin had more men than Richard, but Richard had proven himself on the battlefield over and over again. He was the one who gave the Christians Akka, not before. They didn't have it before. Akka was the last city to fall to the Muslims, the Mamluks, almost a century later. Was there ever a successful separatist group? Kurds, Basque, Chechen, all failed. Who knows if a Kurds will be successful? We'll see. Why was Yugoslavia a limbo land between the East and West in the Cold War? Because it wasn't part of the Soviet sphere of influence. It wasn't part of the Warsaw Pact. It was a communist country, but it wasn't a Soviet-influenced communist country. Interesting, Harry. What was Michael Jackson's impact on American history? Obviously, one of the most impactful cultural singers and dancers, and his personal scandals were obviously some of the trials of the century in the late 20th and early 21st century. Actually, trivial, the smoking jacket for pipe tobacco, which I'm wearing, was invented by the British. What's my views on Hinduism? Oldest world religion, integral. You can't have India without Hinduism, and you can't have Hinduism without India. I'll take Napoleon. Just the tactics are incredible. I'll take him over Temujin or Genghis Khan. Everyone has their own vision of history, and Richard was a he didn't win any wars. Then why did he get Arca? Yes, a white man taught me. That's why I think this way. That's just so reductionist. It's basically racist. You not know about the little history of Israel and the Palestine conflict, which I explained yesterday in detail, Jesse. I haven't talked it hardly at all today, and everything I said about that was true. So why wasn't Tokyo a nuclear bomb, but Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Actually, the third bomb was targeted for Tokyo, and Tokyo had already been firebombed. That's the main reason why they bombed those. So what is the difference between a nation, a country, and a state? A country is the land, the state is the government usually, and the nation refers to where the group of people are settled. So the nation state created by the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 in the modern Western way of thinking is an area settled by a particular entity of people who have set up their own government. I'll give you a few. Public work programs, increase the standard of living and job creation, thoughts. Those are things that already existed. I'm not saying the Third Reich never did anything correct. I'm saying they didn't really do anything special or unique. And what they did that was atrocious was atrocious. That's like saying Stalin, the man of steel, is unique because he made Russia industrialized. A, that's not fully true. B, he did industrialize it, but it's not like Russia was the first place to get industrialized. It's unfair to say the the Nazis have a unique hold on that. They did what other countries of the time were doing anyways, and something the other countries weren't doing was killing millions of people. So there's that too. I know you're not defending them, Jason, but I understand what you're trying to say. I'm not saying that they never did anything productive. I'm saying they never did anything unique. If Germany were to not enter World War I, do you think their economy would grow and would expand their colonial empire? No. Watch Kingdom of Heaven by Ridley Scott. He based his movie on historical references. Yes, so did Braveheart by Mel Gibson, and Mel Gibson is wrong about a lot that happened in Braveheart. What do you think would happen if nuclear bombs were developed in World War I instead of just after World War II? Well, again, I say World War II and World War III, but I would say the wars would end a lot sooner. The threat of the usage of that really would contain militaristic advances. It did so in Vietnam and Korea, for instance. Are the Palestinians living there now the people who were always there, and why did the previous occupants leave? Conquered, diasporas, exiles, and no, they weren't. There you go. Richard was a useless ruler. He was a good general, and it baffles me that historians and people can't separate the two. I can, and I always have, Harry, so I'm here for you. Liam, it's actually, yes, I do talk quickly, but it's actually how I give a detailed understanding. Thank you for your support, Kathy. What's your favorite history topic, one that you nerd out on the most? Usually the one I'm discussing at the moment, but Russian history is my specialty. Is history the massive murders, injustice, and unrest was caused by Christianity and Mongolians and now the Jews? Then why world only says Islam? That's because it's not. And because people don't say that, Danish, you're just assuming that Islam is always bullied, which is actually if you actually go on my Substack, you can read an article about this. From the Hijra onward, Islam has had a mentality of being oppressed and targeted. And that is what continues to this day. It doesn't matter if it was the aggressor or not. It has had that mentality because Muhammad was forced to leave Mecca and go to Medina. When Muhammad conquered Mecca, He was doing it as seeing himself as a victim, seeing himself as oppressed, seeing himself as a target. And that is exactly what you're doing right now, Danish. And I'm not saying that Christianity and Judaism and Hindus have not done a bunch of horrible and Mongolians and other groups haven't done a bunch of horrible things in conquest. But A, it's not about religion. People do this whether they have religion or not. And B, if it is about religion, Islam is part of that as well. The problem right now is there is a modern issue of radical terrorism in one major religion, not in the others. It is a major issue because tens of millions of people either support it or contribute to it or act within it. It doesn't occur within Christianity. It doesn't occur within Judaism. And the biggest ones in danger of that, Danish, are peaceful, reasonable Muslims like yourself. Why has state-sponsored science replaced religion? Because people, since the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, have seen science as a way to answer many of the problems in our lives and to use science to create technologies that bring us into the modern world. So, why did Crusaders fight Muslims? The Crusades, no one is going to like this because everybody for some reason wants to rewrite history about this, but the Crusades were a reaction to Seljuk Turkish aggression against the Byzantines, the Battle of Manzikert, the other attacks upon the Byzantine Empire, led the Byzantine Emperor Alexios, I think was his name, to ask Pope Urban II to start a crusade, which he did with the Council of Clermont in 1095, saying, Deus vult, God wills it. The Crusaders, most of them French, but some of them from Germany and England, eventually were able to conquer Jerusalem in 1099 and set up the Kingdom of Jerusalem that was overthrown by Saladin in 1187. There were 4 major crusades and dozens of smaller crusades. Basically, it was all about conquering Muslim lands that had originally been Christian, that were taken by the Muslims through the centuries, helping the Byzantines, and protecting Christian pilgrims who were being attacked when they were on their way to Jerusalem. That, by the way, is all a fact. What's the most important thing that happened in the 6th century? Oh, I would say the bubonic plague, which kept Justinian from reconquering the Western Roman Empire. How did the left wing and right wing evolve? They developed in the 1800s. When did they apply to lowercase liberals? I believe it was the Paris communes, and those who wanted radical revolution were on the left, and those who wanted to reform the government were on the right. I think that's where it comes from. Or it might be about, I'm not sure exactly where it comes from beyond that. Yes. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Harry, yeah. Did you have a chance to look at David Irving, a British historian who gives an interesting alternative perspective on World War I and World War II? No, Sabir, I'm sorry. I got to look into them. It's good to see you, though. Nick, hello. You name it, England beat it. That's true. And pressed it. Did you use Control of USA? Nope. Thank you for joining us, Foch. Let me see here. What comes after capitalism? This is what we should be asking ourselves these days. Obviously, a big Marx would say socialism and then communism. Let me see here. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. Just looking for the chat. People are talking amongst themselves. We're over an hour. We're almost at an hour and 10 minutes. We're going to wrap it up in a minute. I do not, Razor, but thank you. Some Muslims are good. Others follow Muhammad and the Hadiths. Do you think Gorbachev could save the Soviet Union if he had used suppression? Yes, but his own philosophy that was helping the Soviet Union get back on its feet prohibited him from actually using suppression. So, how do you feel about the ancient Sumerians? Sumerians, obviously one of the most important civilizations, Akkad, Urgerut, some of these important cities that are the basis where we get the most ancient historical records from, ledgers and writings and things like that. Yes, you mean, actually, Evan, it's called Yathrib. It's not called Medina originally, but yes, I know it's also called Makkah. And I'm not saying that he was a loser. I'm saying he was exiled. He went to Medina. He returned with an army. He conquered most of the Arabian Peninsula. And by his death, that idea of being oppressed, being targeted, and needing jihad became part of the Muslim ethos. The Rashidun Caliphate, the Umayyads, these were conquerors. These were not spreading through witnessing and evangelism necessarily. How do you feed 8 billion people? Collapse is imminent. It actually isn't. We have more than enough food. Most famines are man-made or political. And we actually are facing an underpopulation crisis in the next century, not an overpopulation crisis. Let me see here. Why didn't Japan declare war on the Soviet Union the same time Germany did in World War II. Probably because they didn't want the Russians attacking them. They were close enough to be attacked, and they didn't want to ask for fighting a two-front war of their own between, and they were already fighting in China, so it would have been a three-front war. It would have been fighting in China, would have been fighting in the Pacific, and fighting in Eastern Russia, Manchuria and stuff. Let me see here. Why isn't there an Asian economical union like European Union or the African Union? Because they are very different. They do a bunch of different things. And Nick, thanks for subscribing. What would the world look like if Christianity lost against Islam? It did lose against Islam. Look at the Crusades. The Middle East did not return to Christianity. Can you tell me, please, what is your opinion about what's going on in Palestine? In the war, bring home the hostages, destroy Hamas, get Netanyahu and Abbas out of power, and figure out a two-state solution. I said it yesterday. I'm going to say it again. Local, you probably weren't here, and a lot of people don't like that for some reason, but I think that's a fair perspective. Hard to believe, but a grandson of a 10th U.S. president just passed. Yes, Tyler. I love music. It's great to see you, by the way. Yes, Howard Ruffin, I think is his name. How can the USA be willing to fight to keep Taiwan free from mainland China when it doesn't even recognize Taiwan as an independent country? Because the Nationalist Front, or the Republic of China, has always been recognized by the U.S. government in one form or another. They've been helping Chiang Kai-shek for a long time. And Kevin, thank you so much. I really appreciate that donation. If you feel so inclined, do likewise. Why didn't the Iraqi monarchy, led by the Hashemites, create a union with Syria and Jordan? I don't know exactly why, Amar, but I would say that obviously the rise of Saddam Hussein precluded any sort of union of that caliber. I forget why they were overthrown in Iraq. They were not overthrown in Jordan. Gustavo Adolfo, I'm trying to remember. You mean Gustavus Adolphus, the famous Swedish king, who won a bunch of wars in the 30 years, won a bunch of battles in the 30 Years' War? Yes, I've studied him a little bit. Yes, I know what jihad means. It means struggle, which is part of exactly my argument. My argument is that because they felt a sense of oppression and victimization and struggle, there's a struggle against sin, there's a struggle against the world they live in, there's a struggle against all bunch of things. Part of that has led to all sorts of retaliation, namely the century of conquest. Yeah. Yes, Evan, I do not make stuff up on the fly. What is your favorite video game right now? Ooh, I love Rise of Nations. There's a good RTS historical game to play. Why are Jews from Ukraine allowed to live in a country that never lived in before that includes their ancestors? Isn't that colonization? No. It's called resettlement. It's called going back to your roots. It's like if Native Americans lived in areas they once lived in, or it's migration, it's return. That wouldn't be colonization. If the Byzantines would have reconquered the Roman Empire lands, do you think they could have changed the capital to Rome? No, Nova Roma was already the rule, so Constantinople would have been the capital. Look at what Justinian was doing with the Hagia Sophia. What core principles of yeah. Harry, thank you for distinguishing between socialism and communism. They're not distinguished enough. Do you believe religion should be taught in public schools? Yes, but objectively, like I do. Yes, the J word is just struggle against evil in Arabic. So thank you, Evan. That supports exactly my point of what jihad is and how it has been used historically based on the Hijra and from then on. So thank you, Evan, for proving my point. Why didn't independent dukes call themselves kings? Example, Burgundy. Was there such a thing as an independent duke? They were called duchies. I don't think they had the full, because they didn't have as much land, and they didn't have an entire people group situated in their region, they didn't consider themselves to be kingdoms necessarily. The duke was a duke or earl or count in the feudal system was loyal and paid his fealty and pledged his fealty and loyalty to a monarch. And because the ruler of the Burgundians did that, usually to the French king, the Burgundy was a duchy. But also, these were very autonomous in the sense that they could do what they wanted, which is why the Burgundians helped the English in the 100 Years' War. And yes, Walter, that is true. They are still fighting. And Bell, thank you so much. Yes, you can go back to Saudi Arabia and live there. There's nothing wrong with that, Evan. Nothing at all. There's nothing wrong with people going back and living in an area that they once occupied. It's called migration. It's called recolonization. It happens all the time in human history. People move to areas they've never been and move to areas that they used to be in. there is nothing wrong with that at all. So let me see here. So, because you believe everyone should go back to their home country, why don't you go back to Europe and all white people leave USA? I never said they should. I said they can, and you need to stop yelling. Yeah, duchies usually pledge their fealty to a king in the feudal system. So why don't white people go back to Europe and leave brown people lands? Because, well, I never said that they can't or that they should. I said that they're allowed to. And there's a difference between the Europeans colonizing North America when they have lands they can go back to. What country did the Jews have when they went back to Israel? What home country did they have? They didn't have one. They had countries where they were being oppressed and constantly attacked. And so their jihad, their struggle against sin and against the world around them, meant going back to their homeland. Michael, I think that Plato believed that Atlantis was a real place. But I don't think Plato believed that it was a real place. I believe that Plato felt that it was a good teaching method, and it was this idea that beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is often seen as the Straits of Gibraltar, there must be something out there, which would be, today, we would know it as North and South America. So, Michael, I don't believe that Atlantis was a real place. I think it was a teaching lesson for the Greeks. Yes, Evan, I said should. Thank you for listening to what I am saying. Thank you, that dude. You don't have to scream out what you say. Is there a realistic way to create a world government that's functional and isn't oppressive? I don't know if supranationalism really works, and I think people are turning away from supranationalism the more we go into history. Would President Lincoln support Taiwan or mainland China? I would go with Taiwan. Trivial mistake. Yes, he is a Zionist 100%. He didn't answer my questions about where. I have answered all of your questions, Evan. I'm getting tired of answering your questions, especially when they are all capitalized and you are screaming. That's not fair. I have answered all of your questions. Yes, there were Jews from Ukraine. There were Jews from all over the world that went and lived in Israel. Jews from the United States and Jews from all the Arab worlds all the Arab countries they were kicked out of. Brown versus Board of Education. Still, BIPOCs are behind whites and Asians in education. Yes. Typically, well-funded districts in wealthier areas tend to have better educational services. And there is a kind of a segregation of quality in the American educational system, to be sure. Yeah. Let me see. I have a question for you. If you have one choice, what will you choose between power, money, and technology, or lots of good deeds and peaceful life? I would choose the latter, but a lot of people think they need the former to do the latter, and no one is going to say actively they would rather have the former than the latter, so that a lot of people will lie. And hello, Freshly, good to see you. Do you think the Byzantine Empire is the GOAT because they combine Roman and Greeks? Like they can't be better. They're really a great empire, definitely underrated. And if you want, you could consider the Roman Empire for existing 1,000 years after it fell in the West with the Eastern Roman Empire or the Byzantines. Plato invented Atlantis to encourage traveling and to help his youth conquer better. You're thinking of Aristotle, who taught Alexander the Great. Plato used it as a lesson about arrogance and how to balance and create a peaceful government. Why did Esperanto fail? Because people are stubborn enough to maintain their own national heritage and languages and would rather do that, and English has become kind of a global language as it is. Why are there so many sign languages? They developed a cohesive language that would be helpful for the hearing impaired. It's an incredible thing what ASL and other sign languages have developed. Why did the Europeans not care about the Africans and drew straight lines as the borders and let future conflict for centuries arise? They didn't expect that to happen because they didn't expect to ever abandon what they had colonized, Damar. The truth of the matter is that most of Africa that was colonized by the Europeans, they didn't think or care about the tribal groups. They didn't include the Africans in that process. They drew lines around these areas based off of what about their worry of impinging on other lands that were already being taken by other Europeans. So it's more about other Europeans than it is about natives. Governments and financial institutions are stockpiling for reserves like crazy. Sounds about right. Were you part of the insurrection on the Capitol Hill? No, I had plans that day. Is it true that Luxembourg is the last Grand Duchy? I think it's Liechtenstein is one of them, but yeah. History. Please help me explain the difference between communism and socialism. So I've often seen, although communism was originally intended to be an economic system and was a lot closer to socialism, the way it's developed is that socialism is an economic system that believes in no private property, the redistribution of wealth, socialized benefits from the government, and the nationalization of most, if not all, industries. Basically, by taking from the wealthy and redistributing wealth, services are able to be provided by governments that benefit the people. That's socialism. Communism is a centralized, planned economy that socialism can turn into sometimes, where the government basically through the party or through the bureaucrats, seizes the means of production and not just redistributes it, but doles out exactly what should be produced, how it should be produced, and who produces it. So it's different. One, they have some similarities. They do overlap between each other. Communism also is more of a political ideology that represents more of authoritarian government, no religion, things like that. It has become cultural and political more than just economic, which is what Marx originally envisioned it as. Yeah. Yes, Evan, it's well known. So how did the Rashidun Caliphate get to the Maghreb? How did Egypt and Tunis and Libya, how did these become Muslim majority areas? How did Morocco? It wasn't through conversion. What happened to the Sassanids in Persia? What happened to the Sassanid Empire? Why didn't the Sassanid Empire exist after about 650? How did the Byzantines lose control of the Levant? Yeah, and trivial, that is true. All religions at some point were spread by the sword. Buddhism is an exception. Hinduism was an exception for some time. I guess I'm asking more, why is there ESL? Oh, because it's all based on what country you're from. It's all based on how you communicate with people who are hearing impaired in different countries. There's not a standardized sign language. Yes, I don't state my sources. I let people go back and double check and fact check me all the time. You can fact check me if you want. I sometimes will refer to where I heard a particular thing, but I have been studying this stuff for years. Look, if you want other YouTubers who talk about this stuff, look up Epimetheus and the way he describes the Muslim century of conquest. Al-Andalus did not just become Al-Andalus overnight when all the Spanish said, okay, we're going to stop being Christians and embrace Islam right now. That didn't happen. It happened through conquest. I don't think that, Turk Patch. I think AI has got its biases. We've seen this with Gemini AI and Google, but Thank you for asking the real questions. Are Africans willing to stop genociding one another on the basis of tribe and language supremacy? I think not. Look at Europe throughout its history. It happens everywhere, I would say. Do you think Italy's dreams would have crushed for a new Roman Empire once the German invaded France and established a puppet state? No. Mussolini was impressed by the Nazis and the way they attacked the French, and he was actually willing to work with Hitler after that, not before. Do I believe Israel? Thank you for using a crude term. It's always fun when people do that. But is Israel a real country? Yes. And the Palestinians have a right to their own real country too. It's amazing how people demand that I give an answer. I give a moderate answer, and nobody's happy with that. It's fascinating. But at least it's not a constant talk about it today like it was yesterday, and you're actually asking questions about real history beyond just a current issue. Ownership is theft, kulak scum. Yes, Henry. Thank you for referencing the kulaks. Bonjour, Hussein. Do you stand with the Palestinians against Hamas? Yes, absolutely. A state cannot simultaneously exercise control over territory it occupies in military attack if the territory on the claim that it is foreign poses an ingenious national security threat. If it's being attacked by them, then it certainly can. Yes. MIDI, if it's being attacked by them, if people are being killed by them, then yes. If terrorist organizations are trying to destroy them and kill all the people living in that region, then yes. Yeah. Let me see here. All right, we're at 83 minutes. I'm seeing the, yes. Thank you, I Love Music. I appreciate you backing me up. Yeah, let me see. I'm behind on the chat again. And I appreciate all the talk. Harry and you and Harsh, very friendly in the chat for once, and some other people asking some really great questions. SM, I do not believe it is. How do you see the world by the year 3000? I don't know. I am the last one to judge that, especially with the exponential growth of technology and what it's done in just the last century and a half. And Sunday's lecture will be about early American history, so join us tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. I won't be interacting with the chat as much, but I will be talking about early American history. Yes, Anthony, Free Palestine from who? Why did Lithuania decline the offer of Kaliningrad by Russia in the Soviet era? I don't know. I think it's because they hated the Soviets. Thank you, SM, for saying I am a Zionist puppet just because I happen to have an opinion that's different than yours. Ad hominems. That's what that's called. That's called the ad hominem fallacy. I haven't. I mentioned Rise of Nations is a good historical game. I like RTS. So, Evan, I'm not only a Zionist, I also am a Palestinianist, if you want to call it that. Is it so crazy that these two people could exist and have their own countries next to each other? It's not impossible. Egypt exists next to Israel. They play nice with each other. I don't know where Simon is. I've learned it from a bunch of different places and a bunch of different sources. Trivial. I have taught before. Think again. So, and I will teach in the future. And techno, I do not speak Hebrew. But anyways, I'll check it out. Thank you, Ricky, for the recommendation. And I have read up on them, techno. Yeah. Did China not start the Industrial Revolution because its language wasn't alphabetic? Thus, no, Joe, it didn't start because it had kind of become insular and was economically starting to go backwards and decline in the late 18th and early 19th century. No, Danish, I don't believe this. Did you know that France was going to plan an invasion of Spain when Francisco took over? Sounds about right. They were worried about the fascists there. Actually, Google Scholar is an excellent place to find reliable sources. So there is a real thing called Google Scholar that you can use to find real sources. Thoughts on Yom Kippur, the absolute biggest embarrassment of Golda Meir's political career. My favorite historical age, late 19th century, Age of Empires. Why did the Sassanid Empire fall so easily? Constant fighting with the Byzantines had weakened them and made them mincemeat for the Rashidun Caliphate. Yes, I am biased. Everybody has a bias, but I am trying my best to be as objective as possible based on historical facts, and everything I am saying is an actual historical fact. And I know that they are facts because a lot of people don't like them, and everybody is fighting with them, and that's how facts are, and people are just throwing out ad hominems. So, and yes, Leah, hello. Yes. Let me see here. Trivia. I don't reveal personal details about myself. I have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree. If you don't believe me, that's fine, but that's actually true. Yes. Anyways, so. That didn't happen, Code. Why can't we go back to Constantinople? They're trying to. Believe it or not, they are trying to. It was called Istanbul by the Turks when the Turkish Republic to establish their history and control over that region was being challenged by Europeans who wanted to take over it. So, look to the left if you're 28 years old. There, you got your answer. I'm not going to say trivial. You're going to have to take it on faith. I don't share personal details about where I got my education from. Sorry, it's just what I do on this channel. Anyways, Israel denies the Armenian Holocaust. I did not know that. So that is something the Turkish government certainly denies it. Most of the world has agreed that there was indeed some sort of genocide of the Armenians. I did an entire video on it. The relocation of them, the forced relocation to the Syrian desert when they were the roving gangs that were the Turks that hunted down and killed them, abused their women. About 1 million to 1.5 million Armenians died in that war. So, yeah. Joe, not quite. The crescent is a relatively new symbol, though. Yes. All right. Interesting. Do you believe CNN is real news? I don't trust most mainstream media sources, which is why I get my news from a bunch of different sources. Okay, so they have agreed with the death toll finally. Okay, because it's about 1.5 million to 2 million people. They originally said only 300,000. Crusades had plenty of bad things happen to them, and there's a lot of horrible moments in them. They're not all justified. I think only the first crusade was actually fully justified. We don't know what's going to happen in Syria. I think it's going to remain a very powerful, strongman kind of dictatorship and authoritarian regime. So, anyways. Yes, Techno, I would agree with you there. Interesting. And, well, the Armenian genocide, they sure definitely recognize, and the Gaza one, they're not going to because there isn't one. And I'm just saying that because I know that you don't agree with that. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Let me see. Which year was the best year? I can't pick one. It's too hard to pick that. How do you feel about the 66 million killed by Jewish Bolsheviks? How do I feel about the 66 million killed by the Bolsheviks? The fact that a lot of them were Jews means nothing. So thank you for being an anti-Semite, but favorite ice cream. Okay. I'll finish with favorite ice cream. Peanut butter chocolate. There you go. Sorry, everyone. I'm out of energy. I've gone 90 minutes again because people just like throwing questions at me, and I appreciate it. Another good Q&A and everything. Yes, we have been trying to end. It's my fault that we keep going. Yes. Evan, I'm ignoring your questions because I've answered all of your questions. In fact, I spent more time interacting with you than anyone else. So anyways, let me see here. Sunday lecture, Early American History. Join us 4 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't, like and subscribe. Go ahead and do so. I will see you all then. And thank you for a really good discussion and all of the Q&A. And even if you don't agree with everything that I'm saying, I appreciate you hearing me out and listening to me. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys. I will see you guys again later. And we won't be late. I wasn't late. I was like 2 minutes late. There you go. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I will talk to you again later, tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I will be lecturing on early American history. So come and enjoy that. And hopefully we have a more peaceful Q&A if we do have time for that at the end. Take care. Have a wonderful Saturday. Stay safe out there. And remember, love history.